Am I that for announcing my divorce through a website thread? Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, a union where both people support and respect one another. For the past 5 years, I, 29, tried to live by that ideal with my husband, Andrew, 35. We've been together for nearly a decade, but what started as love and promise turned into neglect, dismissal, and heartbreak. On paper, things might have seemed fine, but in reality, our marriage was anything but. It wasn't one catastrophic moment that broke me, it was 1,000 little cuts, a slow accumulation of indifference and mistreatment that finally pushed me to my limit. From the very beginning, my mother-in-law made her disdain for me crystal clear. At our wedding, she wore white, claiming it was a family tradition. It wasn't. She criticized my cooking, my appearance, and even my weight, once calling me fat in front of everyone at a family gathering. My husband's response? Silence. Not a single word in my defense. She took things further when she accidentally threw away my grandmother's necklace, dismissing it as cheap costume jewelry. That necklace was priceless to me, but her thoughtlessness made it clear she had no regard for my feelings or my place in the family. Whenever I tried to address her behavior with Andrew, he'd shrug it off, claiming I was overreacting or too emotional. While my Emile was an ever-present source of tension, my husband wasn't much better. He spent more time on Reddit giving strangers relationship advice than talking to me. The irony wasn't lost on me, especially when I discovered he spent hours rating women's breasts online. His priorities were painfully clear when he forgot my birthday, our anniversary, and even skipped our first ultrasound because his mom needed help fixing her Wi-Fi. Andrew also refused to take responsibility around the house. The cleaning, cooking, laundry, everything fell on me. His contribution to our home began and ended with his job and his Reddit account. When we argued, he'd throw sarcastic "buddy" into his sentences, like I was just an acquaintance he could barely tolerate. His lack of care and constant dismissiveness chipped away at whatever love I had left. The final straw came a few weeks ago. I'm 5 months pregnant with our first child, a daughter. When my ML started making comments about how she'd have to whip the girl into shape and toughen her up because I was too soft, I told Andrew I didn't want his mother influencing our child. He laughed it off, calling me paranoid and saying I needed to get over it. But this wasn't just about me anymore. I've seen my ML hit my husband's nephew over trivial things, and I feared she'd treat my daughter the same way. Andrew's solution? He suggested his mother watch our daughter while we worked. When I objected, he called me paranoid and insisted his mother would be a big part of our daughter's life whether I liked it or not. This was the same man who let his mother walk all over me for years. If he wouldn't stand up for me, how could I expect him to stand up for our child? That was when I realized I had to protect my daughter from the toxic environment I'd endured for far too long. I've spent years trying to make this marriage work, hoping things would get better. But when Andrew chose fixing his mother's Wi-Fi over attending our daughter's first ultrasound, I knew where I stood in his life. So I packed my things and left. Before I walked out, I sent Andrew a message on Reddit, the platform he used to ignore me for years. I explained everything, how his neglect, his mother's mistreatment, and his refusal to prioritize our family had driven me to leave. I even reminded him that I had texts proving the worst of his behavior. Then, I blocked him. Now, I'm staying somewhere safe, and I've already contacted a lawyer. My future is uncertain, but I know one thing for sure. I refuse to let my daughter grow up in a household where her needs and well-being come second to someone else's selfishness. Am I the for walking away from a man who neglected me, let his mother bully me, and dismiss my fears for our daughter's safety? Maybe. But if choosing peace for myself and my child makes me the villain in his story, so be it. After leaving Andrew, I knew there would be consequences. His predictable meltdown began almost immediately. He and his mother launched separate smear campaigns, spreading lies to paint me as an unfit mother and a terrible wife. According to them, I had abandoned my responsibilities, cheated on Andrew, and was moving in with some imaginary lover. None of it was true. The online rumors were just as ridiculous. Trolls, likely Andrew's friends, spread baseless claims, accusing me of being a deadbeat and claiming Andrew worked 2 jobs to support me. In reality, I've always worked, and I actually earn slightly more than him. These lies felt like an attempt to discredit me, but I refused to let them shake me. I stayed focused on securing a stable future for myself and my daughter. Navigating the legal aftermath of my decision was overwhelming, but I'm grateful I had the support of family and a skilled lawyer. For others in similar situations, I recommend consulting a pro bono lawyer who specializes in rental rights. That's how I managed to leave without financial fallout. Since Andrew and I had fulfilled the minimum rental period, I worked with our landlords, a kind older couple, to remove my name from the lease. This process wasn't without its challenges. I ran a credit check to ensure nothing would come back to haunt me financially. It turned up a few discrepancies, likely from Andrew's mishandling of joint accounts, but addressing them was another step in regaining control of my life. Looking back on our marriage, I realized how much gaslighting I endured. Andrew had a way of twisting reality to make me question my sanity. He'd invite people over without telling me and insist he'd mentioned it beforehand. He'd claim he completed chores I had done myself. Even when I had clear memories or evidence to the contrary, he'd brush me off with, "You must be misremembering." The worst part was how he dismissed my emotions. Whenever I raised concerns about his mother's behavior or our relationship, he'd accuse me of being overdramatic. It reached a point where I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. I even feared I might have early onset dementia or schizophrenia because he made me doubt my own perceptions so thoroughly. To cope, I began documenting our interactions. I wrote down conversations, took photos of completed tasks, and kept screenshots of texts. Even then, Andrew found ways to manipulate the narrative. "You're just being paranoid," he'd say. But having a record helped me reclaim some of the power he'd stripped away. Sharing my story online was terrifying, but it became a turning point. I needed to document my experiences in a way Andrew couldn't twist or erase. By putting my truth out there, I reclaimed my voice and found support from others who understood what I'd been through. The response was overwhelming. Messages of encouragement poured in from people who had faced similar situations, reminding me that I wasn't alone. But the post also drew negative attention, nasty DMs and comments, likely from Andrew's friends. He even claimed he received death threats, which seemed unlikely and contradictory. The fact that he deleted his Reddit account shortly afterward made me suspect his guilt even more. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm regaining control of my life. I'm safe, staying with family, and working with my lawyer to ensure my daughter and I have a secure future. Andrew's lies don't scare me because I have the evidence to counter them, and I won't let his manipulation define my story. Leaving wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Sharing my experience has reminded me that I deserve better for myself and my child. And while the road ahead is uncertain, I'm finally free to move forward without the weight of Andrew's neglect and gaslighting holding me back. To everyone who offered support and kind words during this journey, thank you. Your encouragement has been a light in this difficult time. For anyone facing a similar situation, know that there is hope and there are steps you can take to reclaim your peace. You're stronger than you think.
Am I that asshole for saying my sister's cooking ruins Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving is a big deal in our family. Every year, we gather around a table laden with dishes brought by everyone, and it's usually a warm and joyful tradition. But one thing throws a wrench in the festivities every year. My sister's cooking. While she's a wonderful person in many ways, cooking is not her forte, and yet, she insists on bringing homemade dishes every single time. Take last Thanksgiving, for example. She showed up with her special recipe stuffing. I'm still not sure how she managed to make it dry and oversaturated with random spices like cinnamon and cardamom. It was like eating sweetened sawdust. The year before, she'd brought a green bean casserole with a strange, chewy texture. She later admitted she'd used coconut milk and almond flour to experiment. Neither dish was well received. In fact, they were barely touched. This year, I'm hosting Thanksgiving, and I decided to take charge. I wanted to create a cohesive menu that everyone could enjoy without the awkwardness of dodging her experimental dishes. So, I kindly asked my sister to bring non-food items like wine, soda, or flowers instead. I thought this was a diplomatic solution, but she didn't see it that way. When I explained my plan to her, she accused me of being controlling and shutting her out of the family gathering. She said Thanksgiving is about everyone contributing, and by asking her to skip cooking, I was making her feel unwelcome. I tried to reassure her that everyone appreciated her effort, but emphasized that her contributions could be meaningful in other ways. That didn't go over well. "I'm bringing my famous green bean casserole whether you like it or not," she declared. Famous? Sure, but not for the reasons she thinks. Before I could respond, my mom weighed in, telling me to let my sister bring whatever she wanted because it's the thought that counts. Suddenly, I was painted as the villain for wanting an edible Thanksgiving. I tried to compromise, but things took a turn when my cousin sent me screenshots from a family group chat I wasn't included in. My sister was venting about how I was stifling her creativity and announced she was preparing not one, but 3 dishes for her Thanksgiving trio experience. She even mentioned designing individual place settings and menus for her creations. Things got worse when I heard about her grocery haul. It included canned oysters and edible glitter. I couldn't shake the feeling that Thanksgiving was spiraling into chaos. My mom told me to step back and let my sister shine, arguing that it would make her happy and get it out of her system. Meanwhile, my dad casually suggested bringing extra rolls, just in case. As Thanksgiving approached, my anxiety grew. I decided to let my sister bring her trio of dishes to keep the peace, but I planned plenty of backup food to ensure no one went hungry. Then, my mom dropped another bombshell. My sister was adding a surprise dish to her contributions. She wouldn't reveal what it was, but given her track record, the family was understandably nervous. By this point, I felt resigned to the chaos. My cousin texted me privately to ask if I had backup food ready, and my dad reassured me with a wink, "We'll survive. At least it'll be memorable." Thanksgiving morning arrived, and true to form, my sister showed up early, laden with her infamous dishes. This year, she brought not just her Thanksgiving trio experience, but also a mysterious platter wrapped in foil, which she carried with a flourish. "This is the centerpiece," she declared, setting the platter in the middle of the table as though unveiling the crown jewels. She didn't stop there. In a whirlwind of activity, she rearranged the table to set the mood for a creative dining experience, moving my carefully prepared dishes to the edges. She brought her own table runner, candles, and even printed menu cards for her creations. At this point, I decided to let her have her moment. I just wanted to get through the night without a meltdown. Her trio experience included glittery sweet potato mash. It looked festive, but the first bite revealed a gritty, sugary texture. The glitter, which wasn't even edible, crunched unpleasantly, a fact brought to light when one of the kids innocently asked, "Why is this crunchy?" Cranberry and oyster relish, a baffling mix of oysters and cranberries that smelled like a cross between clam chowder and spoiled jam. Pumpkin curry casserole. This dish featured raisins and a pungent, fishy aroma that lingered far too long. But the piece de resistance was her surprise centerpiece dish, a turkey gelatin mold. Yes, you read that correctly. She had blended ground turkey with broth and gelatin, molded it into the shape of a turkey, and garnished it with parsley and cherry tomatoes for a festive touch. When she unveiled it, the entire table fell silent, except for my cousin, who started coughing to cover a laugh. The night reached its peak when my mom, who had been defending my sister all week, took a bite of the gelatin mold. Her face froze in an expression of pure regret. She didn't say a word, but the silence spoke volumes. My sister, noticing the lack of enthusiasm, launched into a passionate speech about how traditional Thanksgiving food is too boring and how she was trying to challenge our palates. She even called my ham and mashed potatoes uninspired. At this point, my aunt, the family's usual peacekeeper, tried the gelatin mold and gagged. She quickly apologized, but it was too late. My sister saw her reaction and snapped, accusing the family of being unsupportive and stuck in the past. She even accused me of sabotaging her dishes by not hyping them up enough to everyone. Half the table was suppressing laughter, while the other half stared at their plates, likely wondering how we had gotten to this point. Finally, my sister stormed out, yelling, You'll regret not appreciating my vision when I'm famous." She left most of her food behind, which my cousin and I discreetly threw out after dinner. After my sister left, the atmosphere lightened considerably. My dad's emergency ham saved the day, and the rest of the evening was actually quite enjoyable. We all agreed that next year, we'd either go to a restaurant or skip Thanksgiving altogether. As I sat with my cousin later that night, dissecting the chaos over a much-needed drink, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. The glittery sweet potatoes, the cranberry oyster concoction, and of course, the infamous turkey gelatin mold. All will go down in family history as one of the most bizarre Thanksgiving experiences ever. This year's Thanksgiving may not have been traditional, but it was certainly memorable. Now, I'm bracing myself for whatever fresh chaos my sister might plan for next year. One thing's for sure, it'll be an adventure.
Am I that asshole for refusing to tip after hearing what my waitress said? Last night, I went out to dinner with my mom to meet my boyfriend's mother for the first time. It was a big deal, and I wanted everything to go smoothly. My mom and I are both punctual, so we arrived 30 minutes before our reservation. The restaurant wasn't busy, and they seated us right away, which I appreciated. However, that's where the pleasantness ended. It took 20 minutes for our waitress to even approach our table. She didn't greet us with a smile or a simple hello. Instead, she asked rather flatly what we wanted to drink. My mom and I placed our orders, a ginger ale for her and a vodka soda for me. I noticed she didn't write anything down, but I didn't think much of it at the time. 15 minutes later, she returned with our drinks, but they were wrong. It's hard to mess up a ginger ale and vodka soda, but somehow she managed. My mom received a Pepsi instead of her ginger ale. When she pointed out the mistake, the waitress rolled her eyes, snatched the glass, and disappeared without an apology. At this point, I couldn't help but feel like her attitude toward us was more than just bad service. A little while later, I excused myself to find the restroom. Not knowing where it was, I headed toward the front of the restaurant to ask the hostess for directions. On my way there, I passed the server station and overheard our waitress talking to some of the hostesses. She was visibly annoyed and said loudly, "I hate waiting on black tables. They never tip well." My mom and I were the only black people in the restaurant, so it was clear she was referring to us. She wasn't even trying to whisper. Her words stung, but they also made her lackluster service suddenly make sense. I didn't react outwardly. Instead, I walked up and asked for directions to the restroom, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. Her demeanor didn't change. She gave me quick, dismissive directions, and I went on my way. When I returned to the table, my boyfriend and his mom had arrived. The dynamic shifted immediately. The waitress transformed into the picture of excellent service. She took notes on our orders, cracked jokes, and kept our water glasses full. It was like dealing with a completely different person. Despite my frustration, I stayed composed and focused on making a good impression during the dinner. My mom, boyfriend, and his mother all seemed to enjoy themselves, and the night went off without any major hiccups. By the end of the evening, I decided to treat everyone and pay the bill. When the waitress handed me the card machine, I keyed in 0% for the tip. I smiled at her as I finalized the payment. She didn't notice until after the receipt printed, by which time we were already gathering our things to leave. She tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I'd made a mistake. I looked her in the eye and said, "I don't think so." She then asked if there had been a problem with her service. I responded, "Your service tonight was fantastic, but since I'm a black woman, I don't tip well." Her face turned white, and she let out a nervous laugh. I smiled politely, laughed back, and walked out without another word. Outside the restaurant, my boyfriend's mom asked what had happened. I explained what I'd overheard earlier and how it informed my decision not to tip. She looked shocked and disappointed, telling me I should have tipped anyway to show character. Her words stayed with me, even though my mom and boyfriend both supported my actions. Now, I can't help but wonder, should I have left a small tip anyway, just to avoid the drama? Or was it fair to withhold one after the blatant disrespect I experienced? While I stand by my decision, part of me feels conflicted about whether it was the right way to handle the situation.